There is so much choice out there these days when it comes to picking a marketing channel or platform in which to advertise your business. This is going to vary depending on your industry, your business model, where your target audience are hanging out, importantly, but also what stage of the funnel you're actually trying to reach users at. So in this video, I'm going to be going through a range of different platforms, from Google and Microsoft ads to social platforms like Meta, TikTok, LinkedIn, to even forum-based advertising like platforms like Reddit or Quora, and the pros and cons on each of these and which businesses these may or may not be suitable for. So let's get straight into it. I'm going to be focusing specifically here on the ad platforms themselves and the pros and cons of those, but you can leverage all of these channels both organically and from a paid perspective. It's also worth saying that you want to make sure you're incorporating the retargeting pixels and at least getting the accounts set up of any platforms that you do eventually intend on using. So getting those accounts set up, getting the retargeting pixels on your website or within your Google Tag Manager so that you can begin building those retargeting audiences in advance of you actually then looking to use the platform. This list is by no means exhaustive, but I'm going to be going over the ones that we've personally had experience on both for ourselves and working with clients in a huge range of different industries, from both B2B to D2C as well, so we can give you more tangible insights into how these platforms perform. So I've just put a note here in terms of the category level for you guys to look at, and I will be linking to this document in the description below this video. So make sure after this video is finished, you go ahead and download that so you've got that as a reference point to come back to as well. But I put a note on each of these categories just to help you understand what is this particular kind of category of advertising effective for. So the easiest way to kind of break this down is, firstly, on a search level. The great thing about search advertising is it's intent-based, right? So we're able to target specific searches across all stages of the funnel. So it's great for getting in front of the right people at the right time when they're actually looking for our product or service. But depending on the specific industry you're in, you might sometimes find that it's difficult to target the exact right audience. So you might have a very specific persona where, even though they're searching for a certain thing, you're only serving a certain segment of that audience. And whilst Google does have the ability to do some like custom audiences and layer on some interests on there, it's nowhere near as reliable as social platforms like Meta is at that more interest-based targeting. So that's the only thing to bear in mind with that. Now, the benefits with social is that we are able to target people based on interests. And these interests are going to be pulled from their profile information as well as interactions that they're making on the platform. So these platforms are looking at so many data points, like what kind of videos are they interacting with? What kind of posts are they commenting on? So they have so much insights on someone's behavior to show the kind of things that they are actually interested in. It's worth noting as well that a lot of these social platforms, Meta specifically, was using a lot of third-party data previously, meaning they were using like third-party cookies. So they're able to pull in data from one of their users' behaviors on other websites as well. They were also buying in a lot of data from data providers to understand, like, more about the users on their platform. But now, with a lot of platforms banning third-party cookies, a lot of new privacy regulations coming out, that layer of targeting has now been lost. So it's not as effective as it used to be. In a nutshell, these can be very effective at dialing in specific persona profiles, but you don't really have the control over where, like, is this person actually looking to buy this thing right now? So you do have to factor that in. So whether you're selling like D2C or whether you're selling like a complex business solution on LinkedIn, you don't necessarily know that this person is actually looking to buy your product right now. So you always have to bear in mind, like, what's your average buying cycles and things like that as well, just in terms of like how long you're measuring the performance of these platforms over. The next one is forums, and forums are very, very underutilized. But the nice thing about forums is these can actually be a blend of both social and search, because you have the ability to target people based on interest. So what kind of like threads, what kind of subreddits are they a part of or do they subscribe to? But then on platforms like Quora, you can also look at questions that they've recently engaged with, or questions that they've recently made, or answers that they've recently looked at, and things like that. So you can kind of layer on a level of intent as well as interests, of what people are like actively interested in. And then the final one, direct media buying. So this is completely custom, right? So, some examples of this might be that you find a business in a similar industry to yours who has, maybe that it's an established brand who already has a list, an email list of customers who would be ideal for you. And you could set up almost a strategic partnership. Maybe it's that you kind of do some companies will allow you to kind of hire their email address and pay them a fixed fee, and they will do a sponsorship to their email list. Or it might be more of a strategic partnership where you're doing like a revenue share, or you offer them a cost per conversion if any of their lists sign up. These can be more complex, and you'll often have to negotiate these, build the relationship. Not every company is going to be open to these type of arrangements as well. So this can be much more complex, but there are some great untapped opportunities in this section. So I'll be coming on to that lastly. So firstly, let's start on the search side. And again, I want to say here that these pros and cons are by no means exhaustive, right? This is just kind of comparatively a very, very top level, just to help you kind of understand when picking through some of these. So we'll start with Google Ads, which is probably one of the most well-known ad platforms out there. So one of the great things with Google is that it incorporates both YouTube and Google. So these are the two biggest search engines in the world. Video search is still very underutilized, but in some industries, it can work extremely well. When you think about it, when people are searching for things, there will be some things that people search for just on Google, and they're looking for like an article or like a template for something. Wouldn't make sense to look for a template on YouTube, right? You're generally looking for like a document. So there are going to be searches where some people would use YouTube, and there will be other searches where people would want to use Google, and there'll be other searches where people want to use video. So if I'm typing in, how to replace the washer fluid in my Honda Civic, I'm probably going to go onto YouTube because I want a visual aid. So for us as well, we get a lot of traffic, and a lot of our leads actually come from YouTube, because people are looking for videos like this one that can walk them through something, and they can kind of, do it sometimes as they're watching the video. So you just have to bear in mind, for your product or service that you're selling, would that be better suited for search, like regular Google search, or would YouTube work? Maybe it's a combination of both. The other advantage with Google Ads, they're fairly easy to set up and use, and you can get started for as little as $1 a day. So the barrier to entry for Google Ads is very, very low. Now, some of the disadvantages here are that their recommendations. So for new advertisers, they give these auto recommendations, and they will generally just auto apply these on your account. These can be terrible for new businesses or people that aren't familiar with advertising. So you do have to be very careful, even when you're speaking to Google reps. A lot of the time, as much as they might be well-intentioned, they are trying to sell you into just new products and service offerings they have, and keep you spending on the platform as long as possible, which isn't necessarily got your business's commercial interests in mind. So you do have to be very mindful of that. And it can be worth, if you're looking to kind of scale this out as a channel, seeking the help of an expert, an outside consultant, an agency, freelancer, like whatever it might be, a genuine expert on Google who can help you navigate this, because there is a lot of features they've added in recently which can absolutely sabotage your campaigns, because you have to remember, Google doesn't understand the context of what you're trying to achieve. These auto suggestions are just going based on, hey, we've got this new feature, your cost per clicks could be lower. Just having a lower cost per click doesn't mean you're going to get better results. So you always have to bear that in mind. There's also been a lot of, you may have seen this, has been a lot of price fixing allegations from Google. This has been over the past few years now. There's more and more coming out recently as there's rulings against them being made, as well, of them being a kind of search monopoly and having these kind of deals with Apple where they're basically like restricting any other platforms from, taking over or even just entering the search market, which can create an uncertain future for Google Ads. And also, even just with like price fixing, a lot of the time, this is where, like, when you're adding in conversion data and ROAS data, there's been a lot of evidence to show that actually, if they know you're getting a good return on ad spend, they may be putting your prices up. There's a lot of different metrics and factors that they can be using to artificially inflate the cost you pay as an advertiser on the platform. So you do have to be mindful of that. Whether I sound like a conspiracy theorist or not, these are likely things that are happening. You do have to bear these in mind. Also, competitive industries, because this is such a commonly used platform, they can have extremely high cost per clicks and cost per CPMs. If you're not familiar, is cost per impression. So cost per clicks and cost per impression. So the cost to get in front of your audience to bring traffic to your website can be very, very high in certain industries. And also, due to the heavy competition, being it's such a saturated platform, can be very difficult channel for new businesses to compete on, because people are going to open the first few tabs on their browser, particularly when you're targeting these bottom of funnel commercial search terms, right? Where someone's like typing in a specific product or service. They're at that stage where they're looking to buy. They're going to open up multiple tabs on their browser. And if you've got more established competitors with more social proof, more credibility, more reviews, it's going to be very difficult for you to stand out by targeting those kind of search terms. They're going to be bidding higher amounts because they're going to have bigger budgets. And even if they don't, you just have to bear in mind, people are going to be opening up several tabs. Can you really stand out? Is your offering unique enough? Is it compelling enough to stand out against, the potentially myriad of reviews and social proof these more established brands have? So coming on to Microsoft now, Microsoft Ads is a very overlooked platform and underutilized. So it can actually be a great place for reaching a more elderly or non-tech savvy demographic. You have to think about it, right? Because most people, like if people are on like a Windows laptop, a lot of laptops are on Windows, the default browser is Microsoft Edge. Now, a lot of people who aren't tech savvy, they're not going to go on and download Chrome. More tech savvy people will generally because they're so familiar with it. But for a lot of people, a lot of more elderly or non-tech savvy, they will just use whatever browser they're given. So it can actually be a very good place to reach those individuals. And with that in mind, you can reach users that you might not otherwise reach by just relying on Google. Also, the other benefit here is because there's just lower competition in general, you'll find that you can often get lower CPM, cost per impressions and cost per clicks compared to Google as a result. And also another nice thing about Microsoft Ads is they are rapidly enhancing their targeting capabilities. So they've recently added in, and this is still being rolled out across different countries and different regions, but connected TV capabilities, meaning that you can so the whole bet, if you're familiar with connected TV, what this basically means is that because we're, let's say your Netflix account, for example, right? You're logged into your Facebook profile, your Google, Microsoft profile. So everything's connected. So you can run ads to someone who's been searching for something in the search engine, and then you can target them when they're watching streaming services like Disney Plus or Netflix or National Geographic or any of these kind of channels and more of them are now incorporating these kind of freemium or lower priced ad models, right? And it's being made available to more and more audience. So back in the day, TV ads would have cost an arm and a leg, and you would have had no ability to choose who you're targeting. Now you do. And actually, there is a premium associate. Like when people see ads on TV or on TV platforms, it really elevates your brand from a reputation standpoint. The only thing you have to be mindful of if you are considering connected TV is that there is a much higher barrier to entry, similar to with YouTube, where you really need to be thinking about the quality has to be much higher. People have a much higher expectation in terms of quality there. So you do have to bear that in mind. Now, coming on to some of the cons here. So for Microsoft Ads, you're going to have much lower overall reach and search market share when compared to Google, right? That's going to be the biggest thing, is you're just going to have a much lower overall reach. So you do always have to factor that in. So let's come on to Meta now, and some of the things to think about here. So some of the pros of Meta is that it has one of the most seasoned algorithms when it comes to hunting like a cold audience. So if you put in a target audience and it gets some conversion, it can be extremely effective at just self-optimizing and bringing that cost per lead down. We've seen crazy results on this with clients in a range of different industries, from B2B to people selling direct to consumer. It can be very powerful. And the targeting capabilities of their new Advantage Plus targeting, they call it, this was terrible. Like when the whole, if you guys are familiar, iOS 14, this was when an update that Apple made when they were basically asking people, do they want to be tracked by Facebook or Meta? And if people said no, they weren't allowed to cookie them. So that significantly impacted the targeting capabilities of the platform. But over the past few years, they've been making significant strides here, and actually it's significantly improved now, and the targeting is actually pretty great. And that's using their Advantage Plus algorithm to kind of like layer on and like machine learning to understand like what does an ideal buyer or ideal lead for this business look like. You've also got very reasonable cost per impressions and cost per clicks, and you've got huge reach across both Facebook and Instagram. Some of the cons here is that Meta's making it much more difficult now, particularly in the recent weeks and months, to do manual detailed targeting. They've removed a lot of detailed targeting options, and they are pushing people more toward AI-assisted targeting using Advantage Plus. And as good as this is, it does restrict you if you want to get more control over your advertising and really try and dial in your costs. So it is something to bear in mind. You still do have the ability to layer targeting and get more granular, but they are starting to go in the direction of removing this. So is Google doing this as well, actually, with a lot of their new AI-based platforms like Performance Max and things like that, where they can actually be really effective when set up right. And again, this is where you really need to seek the help of an expert when building out these campaigns. But if you set them up wrong, they can just go completely haywire. These are also very saturated as well, right? You have to bear this in mind. A lot of people are using Meta ads. So the requirements for content experimentation are very high. When people are on Instagram and Facebook, they're so used to just scrolling. So you have to be testing different thumbnails, different hooks and really looking at the metrics and getting very granular to see like, okay, are we stopping people scrolling? Now we've got someone's attention. Are we actually retaining that attention? Are people clicking through? Are they clicking see more? Are they watching, a certain percentage of our video? So you have to be so granular with the experimentation. It does require a very high level of input to really get the best results out of the platform. So coming on to TikTok ads now. So TikTok ads, because this is a lot more people are coming onto the platform, but it still has very reasonable cost per impression and cost per clicks. TikTok shop, similar to like Meta. So Facebook has its own shop as well, like built-in shop. It's great for e-com stores because it allows very easy, frictionless way for people to buy. You've got a great range of targeting options on here as well. The main con is that the content has to feel very native to the platform. Otherwise, you just won't get results. We've seen this time and time again where businesses have tried to go onto TikTok with their, typical high production videos. It just fails. The best TikTok videos just feel like organic content. And actually, as an overall note to all of this, this applies to any of these platforms. When you're looking at creating a content strategy, you have to bear in mind what kind of content are people used to seeing on this platform and making your content feel like that. Don't make your content feel like an ad. This is the biggest mistake people make on all platforms, is they try to do what their competitors are doing or what they've seen other advertisers doing. Very often, most people advertising, most of your competitors are losing money on their ads. What you want to be doing is thinking, how can we make something feel very native, organic to the platform so people are likely to engage with it, whilst also being very attention grabbing. This is the other thing of like social versus search, because search is intent based. So you're going after what someone's specifically searching for. With social, you really have to rely on cutting through the noise. So you have to almost have someone in your team, or if maybe it's you running the ads, you have to be very confident with your ability to create content, to understand human psychology, what really grabs people's attention, what drives them towards taking action. This is much more important when it comes to social. And it's a reason a lot of people fail with social, because they just try and go in with some Canva templates they've created. It's just not going to work. Maybe, 6-7 years ago, you might have got away with things like that. But these days, you really have to be a practitioner in your creatives and your content strategy. So coming on to LinkedIn now, one of the great things about LinkedIn, particularly when you're selling B2B, is you have the ability to target specific job roles and even specific companies if you're going after a more kind of enterprise level ABM approach. They're also rapidly adding lots of new features like CRM integrations and extended attribution windows for like long or complex buying cycles. They've also got a great choice of metrics. They've recently added a metric called dwell time, which is amazing. And I wish more platforms would add this. It basically shows you because sometimes not everyone's going to click on your ad, but they might, if your creative has grabbed their attention, how long have they stopped and actually looked at that ad? It's a very, very underutilized metric, and a lot of platforms don't report on this, but LinkedIn have recently added this in, which is great. They also have thought leader ads, which is what they call them, and this allows you to easily run ads from any employee profiles under a business account, but under the company ad account. So these are great because people would generally trust individuals and they're more likely to engage with content that comes from a personal profile as opposed to a company page. So leveraging both thought leader ads from some of your key employees in the organization, as well as your company page ads, can be a very, very effective strategy for LinkedIn. So some of the cons here, they have very high CPMs on LinkedIn and very high CPCs compared to other social platforms. That's one of the things to be mindful of. You are able to get much more granular with your targeting. And if you're selling very high, and it's typically like if you're selling high value, B2B, can still be a good platform and it will justify those higher CPCs because you're going to have a much higher lifetime value, right? Also, the algorithm isn't as seasoned yet as platforms like Meta, so it's not as good as hunting. But you've still got tons of detailed targeting, and this is actually another pro really for LinkedIn, is that you do have way more ability from a detailed targeting. They're not removing any of that, even though they're adding AI features like LinkedIn Accelerate campaigns. You can still do a lot of the detailed targeting yourself. Also, businesses don't always list themselves as the industry you might expect. So I've seen a lot of times when you're doing specific industry targeting, and then you look at who's seeing the ads, and you're kind of like, why are they seeing the ads? Sometimes businesses don't always list themselves as an industry you might expect them to. So you do always have to bear that in mind and just monitor closely the kind of ads you're showing in front of. Actually, this is another thing here, and I kind of put a note of this here, like demographic reporting. This is quite a good pro with LinkedIn. You can actually see what companies, what specific job roles and job titles have most been engaging with your content. So this can be very powerful for you to kind of vet and audit. Oh, great, we've had XYZ company engaging with our ad. This can also, if you're doing an outbound strategy as a business, this can complement everything your SDRs are doing or your sales team are doing to reach out to these businesses. If you know this business target account you've got was just interacted with your ad, that can then be a really good time for your sales team to make that connection. So it's that can be actually a really attractive thing there. But yeah, so this is where you'll just want to be looking at those demographics report to make sure that you are actually getting in front of the right people, because the targeting can be a little bit off sometimes. They also have a minimum daily budget, unlike platforms like Google and Meta, where you can just put in whatever you want, $1 a day if you wanted to. It's around $9 a day, about £6-7 a day. They've kind of changed this a bit, I think, over the past few months, but there is a minimum spend there to be aware of. And the need for this spend can also increase because you're unable to run multiple ad formats in a single campaign, which means that if you wanted to run a video and an image ad, you'd have to have two campaigns set up. And then if you want that across multiple audiences, that just expands, right? And obviously you don't want to dilute the budget. So it can end up being a very expensive platform just to do the same kind of campaigns that you would otherwise be doing on something like Meta. Cool. So let's come on to forums now. This is Quora and Reddit. There are other forums you can also advertise on as well, but these are like two of the biggest ones out there. The great thing about forums is you have the ability to target users looking up specific questions or topics, which is very, very powerful. You do also have very low CPMs and CPCs. So if I've engaged, like if I've looked up a particular answer on something on Quora recently, you can show an ad on that answer or like on a specific answer. So it can be very powerful for things like that. Or even if I'm part of a particular subreddit, like if I'm part of the marketing or paid advertising subreddit and you have a paid ad automation platform, potentially a really good place to get in front of me. But this comes onto the kind of cons here in that these platforms, Quora and Reddit, for whatever reason, they tend not to be as effective from what we've seen as a conversion channel. Some industries, these will work really, really well. Some industries, so it's always worth testing these, but a lot of the time they're not as good as a conversion channel, but they're great to throw into your marketing mix to actually be building up that brand awareness and finding people. And again, when you're looking at a multi-channel campaign approach, then and you've got the different retargeting pixels on your site, very often if you're bringing, let's say you're bringing in visitors from search intent on Google, you may be able to retarget a decent portion of those visitors then on LinkedIn, on TikTok, on Meta, even though you brought them in from Google. And this is where, as part of a campaign strategy, it kind of goes outside the scope of this video, but I will be doing another one on this very soon. So make sure to subscribe to the channel if you do want to see that. But you do have to factor that in with your campaign strategy. Sometimes it might make sense to do your cold acquisition top of funnel on Meta, and then you have like middle of funnel layers using, Quora, Reddit, and then maybe bottom of funnel on Performance Max on Google. So you have to kind of really look at the overall strategy that you're using for different like channels as well. So just to come on to one of the other cons with forums is the interest-based targeting on these often isn't as reliable as what you'll see on social ad platforms, because you have to bear in mind that when they're looking at interest, I might have engaged with a particular answer on or subscribed to a particular subreddit in Reddit from an old job I was in, and I'm no longer in that job. This kind of applies to any platform of interest-based targeting. You don't really get to know like how up to date this information is. So you'd always have to factor this in. But from what we've seen, it's definitely not as reliable, again, as the more seasoned platforms like things like Meta these days, which is one of the most kind of seasoned social platforms out there. Now, to come on to direct media buying, so some of the pros here, one of the best things about this is you have the ability to negotiate prices direct with publishers, right? So this could be cost per conversion, it could be revenue share in some instances, or maybe it's just a simple cost per click. But because you can negotiate and you're going direct to the publisher, you can often get really great deals here. You also have the ability to get in front of hyper-targeted audience, right? And also borrow trust from other publishers, brands, or individuals. So maybe you can go to, an influencer in your space who has got a marketing list of your ideal customers, and you can say, hey, can you mention our product to your list? And we will give you, X amount per sale that you make, or we will give you, a fixed fee just for sending it out to your list of 100,000 people, like whatever that might be. It can be a very, very powerful strategy to get like super targeted with your audience. It's also less saturated than other channels because a lot of people don't kind of think outside the box with things like this, right? They just go to the kind of main channels that everyone else is using. So it's definitely something to reflect on, like what blogs, what publishers, what magazines, what YouTube channels, influencers, other brands are there that are in maybe a kind of complementary space to you, but they're not like competition. And you can set up these strategic partnerships or direct media buys with. Some of the cons here, though, are that naturally, like if you are going to an individual, you're gonna it's gonna be difficult in terms of like visibility or metrics, and tracking can be difficult. There's also going to be a very manual process because, again, you're going to have to negotiate a lot of these one-on-one, unless you're using like ad exchanges. But a lot of these ad exchanges, like outside of, Google's display network and LinkedIn's display network and some of those more established ones, these can be a little bit for newbies to this. It can be quite complex to set up and actually get going. And then out of home advertising, again, sometimes that can have very high costs. But, I've often seen this with really kind of smart brands where they know, if you know your local community, if you know your area where your customers are, there's sometimes some amazing deals to be had just by kind of thinking outside the box a little bit and taking a bit more of a like guerrilla marketing standpoint on some of these things. Okay. So just some things to think about there as well. Now, final note here to all of this is on placements. This is really important because all of these platforms have different what's called placements, right? So for example, Meta, you've got like messenger campaigns. You've got Meta's, they've got like in-feed ads. They've got their display network. On Google, you've got Gmail. It leverages Google's display network, Google search, all of these different kind of asset types. So you have to be very mindful of like placements, because what you'll find is, I've just put a little note here to basically say that, like, especially platforms like Google, they will tend to sell you. And this is where, again, the recommendations can often be very crap with Google, because they'll say, hey, include display network to get lower costs. But very often, unless you're doing retargeting, display network for cold traffic acquisition can be terrible, because you're going to have a lot of bots. You get a very high amount of bot traffic. You also get a lot of things like accidental clicks, because a lot of like display network you're going to be showing on apps, and we've all seen them, right? These like freemium apps where there's like a big full screen ad that pops up and you try and click close and you end up accidentally clicking the ad. You just end up with loads of crap like that. So you always have to bear that in mind when you're choosing specific placements, because that is definitely going to impact the efficacy of any of these campaigns. And also you just have to bear in mind the context of an interaction. Right? If someone's like you, let's say someone's on, and like even placements, another note on placements, tablets. Let's say someone's on a tablet, you got the display network. I've seen time and time again, like, when we look at like the search reports and where ads are being shown, they're like the CBeebies app, someone's sitting down after work with their kid on an iPad using the CBeebies app. Cool. Okay. You might still be relevant, because if you're targeting me based on an interaction I'd had earlier that day, I might still want to buy your product, but at that time, not the right time. So you have to bear in mind that context. And again, this is where it's not necessarily a bad thing, because you're staying front of mind, but this is where the stages of the funnel become important, and that overall campaign strategy, because not all of these platforms, you might not be using all of these for conversions. Maybe some of them, you're just like connected TV, for example, you can use QR codes and things, obviously, on like TV platforms, but it's unlikely someone's going to make a conversion from that ad. But that could actually be having a significant impact to actually someone saying, maybe I should actually consider these guys. They seem like a pretty legit company. So always factor in as well when you're picking these platforms, like, what do we want this to do? Are we trying to get conversions from this channel? Or are we just trying to plant those seeds? Are we trying to build trust here? Are we trying to educate here? And this is where campaign strategy comes in. So if you do want to see that video that I've got coming up on campaign strategy, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And in this next video coming up, I'm going to be going into how to set some of the key KPIs and metrics for your marketing campaigns once you've chosen your ideal channel. So I'll see you there.